will stand up and speak to you.
Okay, I will listen.
So I thank you. I thank you for being here, for inviting me to listen to us as Pimicikamak people, and to be heard. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for hearing us, and we're hearing you too. And today I was thinking about, you know, what I was gonna say. What am I gonna share? And I just wrote down the things that I wanted to share with you here today. But first of all, I want to thank the Creator for this day.
Thank you.
And November 12th today, Saturday, you know, we are aware today is also the day of last year when Canada endorsed of the United Nations Declaration on the rights of Indigenous rights. I just wanted to bring that today. And you know, it's amazing how things work out, you know, how the day is, our day. And my traditional name is Kapapaguisco. Kapapaguisco, which means butterfly woman.
Ah, hi butterfly.
Yes. And then my English name is Eugennie Mercredi.
Eugenie.
Yes.
That's an interesting name.
Yes. So I'm one of the elected members of Cross Lake, Pimicikamak in our territory.
Right.
And I also was an elected official of the Cross Lake Band, ex officio, and we have our own self-government process, Pimicikamak. Yes. So, Pimicikamak people, we have our population about 7,600, and it's growing. It's growing. I think it's the biggest indigenous population now. It used to be Peguis, but now I think it's Cross Lake Pimicikamak.
Ah, so it is growing.
Yes, it is growing.
That's good.
So today I come to speak to you about this Mother Earth, which we call the environment. And
Now I'm scared.
yes, we are all concerned about this Mother Earth. You know, it's a sacred duty for all of us. And we are all responsible, you know, to bring this awareness and to speak to you about, you know, these corporations like Hydro.
Yeah.
You know, they're getting rich.
Yep.
And yet they're destroying our indigenous lands for their own greed. You know, as we are all aware, water is life. Without water, we will all die. All women have a sacred responsibility of water, because water gives us life. Women are the carriers of our children. Women give life to this world. Today in life, water is critical to all of us. Without water, we won't survive. Our elders always remind us, without water, you can't give birth without water. It's important. I always say water because I want to bring awareness
Because
of
the
this.
flow.
Yes. Today, our good drinking water is being destroyed. It's threatened in a way from Manitoba Hydro development. Since 1977, Hydro Genpeg Dam developed into our territory without the consent of Pimicikamak people. And it was signed at the Northern Flood Agreement by the Cross Lake in 1977, which we call our chief and council, who are Indian agents of the Cross Lake Band. Our sacred duty as Indigenous women is to save Mother Earth, vessels who host the trees, the lands, the animals, the people, and the water that flows and gives lives us to all. Our ancestors long time ago, everything was sacred and it was respected. Our elders were the doctors and also the teachers, lawyers, and life givers back then, and also the wisdom keepers, and also the life givers to birth and death. So that's why water is so important to take care of, and it takes care of us. There are a lot of traditional teachings about water. Even women carry babies for 9 months. All teachings are there for 9 months. Each time you drink water, acknowledge it and thank the Creator for the water. Water is medicine because it is a spirit to us. We use water for medicine ceremonies, tears of joy, sadness, sorrow. And when the father gives the seed and the mother receives in her prepared vessel, the water is there all the time. I just want to bring awareness that when you turn on your switch light back home in your house, think of us out there and thank us for giving you the light, the warmth in your house, the electricity you enjoy at your house, that we give you the power to enjoy. We all need to be aware of the water of this work. I'm stressed everyone here needs to be aware of the global water situation and take action in some way. So all of us people need to come together to make a shift in the way we are living and treating water. We, our spiritual people, do ceremonies and prayers to make a great change. And I just want to say that water means the world to all of us. Let us challenge each other to respect Mother Earth, the environment for the future generations to come and the unborn. Without water, there will be no life. If we are all in good health, good faith, we depend on well-being, we manage with water. For if we are disrespectful or careless with life force, we put ourselves at risk. Let's all be mindful. We need technologies and ceremonies. The water gives life to our relationship to it. Acknowledge simple things in life of water today. So I thank you for listening to me and bringing this awareness for Pimicikamak people in sharing our struggles with the hydro development in our territory. And
Pinching the fire.
I'm just going to read to you a little bit about the we live in our territories, the heart of the boreal forest, in which now is our northern Manitoba, it's our boreal forest. This is the land of the rivers and the lakes, and our rivers and the lake people. Most of our people live in 1 federal and 4 provincial municipalities in this territory. Since 1977, the environment in this territory has been devastated by hydroelectric development. In a modern treaty known as the Northern Flood Agreement of NFA, the federal and the provincial governments and the Crown Utility promised to remedy this devastation. We are naive enough to be shocked and further demoralized when did not happen. That this double disaster on the other adverse circumstances that typically affect Aboriginal people in Canada today was for decades deeply destructive of not only our environment and livelihood, but also the whole national life and moral of our people. We are attempting to deal with the public inquiry recently called Ongoing Ecological, Social and Moral Catastrophe. The Indian Act and its administrators provided little assistance. Mostly the act seemed like the milestone around our necks. Recognizing this, our people began a few years ago to rebuild our traditional form of government and updated to meet the challenge at hand. This was and is still grassroots-based process. Government of the people, by the people, is a fundamental concept of our people. The role of the Band Council of the Cross Lake First Nation was importantly mainly in tolerating these developments and occasionally in providing some resources. In other respects, its role was limited. To understand this, consider the Band Council jurisdiction extends only to the reserve, which is less than 1% of Pimicikamak traditional territory, and to only one of the 5 Pimicikamak municipalities in that territory. An early step in rebuilding our government was to ask our elders what they knew about Pimicikamak and its governments in times gone by. It turned out they knew a lot. Example, they told us of the roles of the council and the elders and the women's council in our traditional government. The elders were the law keepers. The women were in charge of family and community life. These concepts led to much discussion among our people. We learned how the headman named Paston, who ceased far and was sent to Norrie House to sign the treaty. When he returned, he had new clothes, and he said, "The white man says I am now the chief." In this discussion, many of our citizens came to recognize for the first time that the chief and council of the band had no place in our traditional government. They had been forced on us through the Indian Act. There was a talk of re-establishing the traditional government to replace the chief and council. However, it soon became clear that the traditional government could not meet the needs of our people in the modern world. We needed a body that would specialize in meeting those needs. The body came to be known as the Executive Council of the Nation. Initially, it was accepted by the Chief and Council of the band. Should also be members of the Executive Council. We also needed to address the rapid change that we were experiencing and a large percentage of young people in our population. Young people were largely excluded from participating in traditional government. It was generally acknowledged that they should have formal role in our modern government. Roles of the traditional government, the 4 councils, the Elders Council, the Women Council, and the Youth Council, and the Executive Council are the basis of the Pimicikamak government. The 3 are sometimes referred as the traditional councils. The council functions by the consensus. Each council has its own responsibilities. The Women Council has responsibility in all matters concerning elections. The elders has the responsibility in concerning with traditional law. The Youth Council special roles in the matters concerning training, economic development, and employment. The 4 councils sitting together as single entity establish national policy. They do so orally and in Cree. The Secretary to the Council is responsible for communicating national policy in English in writing as needed. So in terms, Tommy Monias is our Secretary to the Council. He should have been here.
Yes, I will tell him you said that.
Yeah. And my responsibility is to, as a counselor, I am responsible to campaign of truth, telling the truth. National policy is binding upon the Executive Council since the same persons are the chief and council of the band. National policy is also effective, binding upon body notwithstanding the Indian Act. Given that the chief and council of the band today are like a new Indian agent accountable to the minister, it is obvious that this arrangement set up as an institutionalized conflict of interests. Nevertheless, this arrangement was seen as a necessary transitional step along the path to restore self-determination that we have only just begun. In the past, Pimicikamak customary law was always oral and in Cree, so it was inaccessible or even unknown to many. Those who have no practical way to know about our laws can hardly be expected to respect them. For this reason, making some of our laws in writing and in English was an early priority. Our written constitution did not provide any way to do this. However, custom consists of what was found to be acceptable and successful in the past. In the meeting, new circumstances realized that we had much right and indeed responsibility as our forefathers to adapt custom to meet new circumstances. The first step in making modern written laws was to reach a consensus on how this should be done. The second step was to record this consensus in writing. Our people decided that only the Executive Council should be entitled to propose a law in writing. Once proposed, a law must be approved by the Executive Council, the Women's Council. It must be considered by the Youth Council and must be accepted by a special General Assembly of our people. Each of these steps based on consensus. This process was recorded in writing. Using the same process, this became the first written law of Pimicikamak. The lawmaking is a highly consultative. In practice, the Executive Council proposes a law in writing only when there is a broad public demand for it, and only after a lengthy process of public discussion, workshops, and programs on a community television and radio, that results in a draft law that the broad public understanding and support. Through this process, Pimicikamak has made more laws in writing in the past 5 years. The priority for these laws have been to establish basic elements of good governance. Some of these replace elements of the Indian Act, while others deal with matters not addressed by the Indian Act, such as protecting our Aboriginal and treaty rights. The other written Pimicikamak laws are the Pimicikamak NFA Implementation Law, the Pimicikamak Trust and Hydro Payment Law, the Pimicikamak Citizenship Law, and Pimicikamak Election Law. The NFA Implementation Law was made in 1977. It declares to resolve our nation to implement the NFA Treaty according to its spirit and intent. It rejects efforts by the Crown parties to substitute a cash payment instead. It declares a state of national emergency, and it defines the roles of the nation and the band in implementing the NFA, which is Northern Flood Agreement. Our people began to understand how they had been divided, set at odds amongst themselves, and in many cases driven to leave our territory by this act. The Pimicikamak Citizens Law eliminates all of these distinctions. It restores the unity of families and of our people. Citizens is not based on race, it is based on choice. In 1999, our election law abolished the banned elections under the Indian Act. It provided for election of the Executive Council of the nation, and it refers to previous interim arrangements under the first written law. That is, it provided for members of the Executive Council to act ex officio as the chief and council of the band. It authorizes the chief electoral officer to call an election within a week after the law became into effect. The election law was called the next day. Unlike the Indian Act, the Pimicikamak election law was designed to make nomination a serious process with a limited number of real candidates and to provide a real political mandate. It was almost exactly as intended. It also achieved a local voter participation rate of 80%, and it allowed all citizens to vote regardless of residence. It came into force shortly before the Supreme Court of Canada did the same for Indian Act elections in the Hooper year edition. Reforming governance. Recently, the Minister of Indian Affairs reported on the results of the controversial initial consultation process for his work on First Nations governance. The minister report identified a clear pattern of changes desired to offer modern, enabling and effective governance instruments on First Nations. That is the bands. The proposed method for achieving this is not surprisingly federally legislation. As outlined, Pimicikamak has used different methods to achieve similar objectives, but in wider context of our nation. Through more extensive and participatory consultation and consensus-based on process, Pimicikamak has accomplished most of the reforms identified in the minister's report. These include modernized and expected law-making authority, restoration of women's central role in governance, establishing roles for candidates for the election, a responsibility for elections and appeals, process of removing elected officials from the office, extended term of office up to 5 years, much greater authority for elected officials to govern effectively, budgets to be approved by laws, effective limits on increased powers, conflict of interest guidelines, code of ethics, elected and other officials' ability to create governance institutions, clear separations between politics and administration in governance structures, extensive citizen involvement in decision making, and involving officer residents in governance, policy-based governance procedures, active dissemination of governance and information using community radio workshops, community TV and open houses, protection of Aboriginal and treaty rights. The Pimicikamak Nation has a tradition of transparent and democratic government. The reforms has been instituted in modern customary law and administrative arrangements gone some way to restoring these traditions. These reforms have been achieved little assistance and regrettably sometimes considerably resistance from Indian Affairs. More importantly, we have done it our way. While of course there is always opposition in democratic society, these reforms appear to have a high degree of acceptance. It is doubtful that a similar degree of acceptance would have been achieved if these same reforms have been imposed from outside, for example, by the federal legislation. Nor should it be assumed that these same reforms, no matter how introduced, would be found suitable by other Aboriginal people. Work in progress, rebuilding and updating our own government cannot be completed in a day or even a decade. After 6 lost generations, we have much more to learn and to do and will take time. By comparisons with other lawmaking processes in Canada, our process is slow from start to finish. Making one law can take 2 or more years. To date, we have never had more than 2 laws under active consideration at the same time. Last year, responding to growing public interest, the 4 councils determined that the 2 laws dealing with resource management and financial administration are legislative priorities for the nation. Recently, the Executive Council identified a modest budget to begin to work on them. By signing Treaty 5, our people agreed to share the resources of our traditional lands with the settlers. In doing so, they had no intention to condone their own dispossession and extinguishment as people or violation of their environment in disregard of their customary laws. Since that time, however, Pimicikamak was experiencing dispossession and environmental destruction. In this context, a key purpose for resource management law is to make relevant Pimicikamak customary law accessible to those who need to know it and ought to respect it. Among other issues, a resource management law may establish administrative means for addressing the right of the first priority to wildlife resources in Pimicikamak traditional territory, granted by the Article 15 of the NFA and the grandfather rights of other persons recognized by that article. It may also provide harmonizing administration of laws establishing cooperative resource management regime with the province of Manitoba. As I mentioned before, the Indian Act does not establish standards and procedures for administrating the band finances. Our elders told us that having money leads to more problems than having no money. The nation did not yet have any money, and it had no administration to handle money. The band had only available administration, but the Indian Act provides no rules or safeguards for prudent, effective, and accountable administration of funds. These concerns led our people to make the Pimicikamak Trust and Hydro Payment Law. This law established a consolidated revenue fund to the nation. As a trust, it provides that all donation monies must be paid directly to the trust. It provides for independent board for trustees and the corporate trustees. Monies may be paid from the trust only to expressly authorized by law. This law established as the means of Pimicikamak to begin to collect compensation that the hydroelectric utility acknowledges is due by it refuses to pay. If Pimicikamak citizen chooses to make a donation to the trust in the amount of his or her hydro bill, Pimicikamak sends the utility a written forgiveness of indebtedness to the nation in the amount to the citizen bill to be credited to his or her account. The trust has received millions of dollars, including donations from outside Pimicikamak. At present, these funds are applied only to defending the nation. This happened 10 years ago. Couple years Hydro froze this and stopped it. During public discussion leading to our citizen law, we identified up to 17 different categories of Indians resulting from the Indian Act. Standards and procedures implemented from time to time. Indian affairs are arbitrary, and one need only read a newspaper to understand that they do not work. It is not presently clear whether the First Nation governance legislation will address this issue for bans, but in any event, the legislation would not apply to Pimicikamak. Pimicikamak citizens are very concerned for the integrity of the administration of the public funds. They want the highest standards of transparency and accountability. For example, generally accepted accounting principles should apply. Although consultation about financial administration law is at the early stages, it seems like that such a law will not apply only to Pimicikamak, but also the band. I expect that it will better define the financial relationship between them. Looking ahead, Pimicikamak financial administration law may provide the foundation for the new fiscal relationship with Canada, a new emphasis on accountability and transparency to Pimicikamak citizens rather than to the minister's Egosani. That's some of the process of our self-governance that we are self-determination, and we are struggling with this process, but we're not giving up and we're not going to surrender. And right now the Hydro is working on the 50-year license. I'm pretty sure you heard of that.
No, actually,
Okay, that they're trying to get the permit license for this and for Kiask and Kanawapa for the development up in northern Manitoba.
Okay.
The other 4 bands already gave up their rights, which is Split Lake, Norrie House, Nelson House, and York Landing, I believe. And we're the only ones standalone
Oh.
that never signed anything. And we're still battling. Yeah. And we're still struggling. And
Anybody
they even
listening?
no, they even stop us not to be heard.
Oh, boy.
You know, this campaign, you know, they don't. But wherever I have a chance to speak, I go and share. Wherever I get an opportunity, I tell them this is what's happening to us right now.
Yeah.
And we're being flooded. We're being flooded over and over again. And our islands are disappearing. The erosions of the lands, you know, they're disappearing fast. Lots of islands are disappearing massively, and they're disturbing the human remains of our ancestors. They're just floating. Yes, yes, and that's not even being heard. And,
Sorry.
you know, a lot of this destruction and the water. There's a lot of pollution coming from this.
A lot of pollution.
Yes, a lot of pollution coming, and we don't know what's coming up ahead. And we're very concerned about the water. You know, everything is so critical right now of what's happening. And I'm glad you guys are here doing what you're doing. It's a blessing. And I thank you for listening to me, and I hope that, you know, we can pass the messages to the governments that we need to come together.